Welcome back to Life Turns, the channel where real emotions, family struggles, and life-changing twists come alive. Today, I want to share with you a story that feels like it was ripped straight out of a drama, a story of a girl who was treated like a servant in her own home, only to be recognized as a boss in the most unexpected way possible. So sit back, because what you're about to hear might make you question the meaning of family, respect, and self-worth. I grew up in a house where love was measured, not freely given. My parents weren't cruel in the traditional sense, they didn't hit me or scream every day, but they stripped me of something much more valuable, dignity. From the time I could walk, my role in the house wasn't that of a daughter, but of a maid. My younger siblings were spoiled with gifts, trips, and attention. I, on the other hand, was the one carrying trays, sweeping floors, washing dishes, and making sure the house looked spotless. And every time I complained, my parents would silence me with one line: "You should be grateful you even have a roof over your head." At first, I believed them. Maybe this was my fate. Maybe I was born just to serve. But deep down, something inside me kept whispering, "You're worth more than this." That whisper grew louder as I watched other girls my age go to parties, hang out with friends, and live the life of normal teenagers. Meanwhile, I was scrubbing stains off the carpet, folding laundry for hours, and pretending to smile when relatives visited, because if I slipped up, my parents would be embarrassed, and I'd face the consequences later. One moment that stands out was my sister's birthday. She had the biggest cake, all her friends came over, and my parents decorated the house like it was a royal event. But me? I wasn't allowed to sit at the table. I was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, serving drinks like a waitress. I could hear the laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, but I wasn't part of it. My parents didn't introduce me as their daughter, they introduced me as the helper. That night, when I went to bed, I cried into my pillow until my chest hurt. I told myself I would never forgive them for making me invisible in my own family. But I also made myself a promise: I wouldn't stay invisible forever. If they couldn't see my worth, one day, the world would. And so, while I continued doing the chores they forced on me, I started sneaking moments for myself. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd open up my old laptop, the one they never cared about because it was too slow, and I'd study. Business articles, online lectures, anything I could find. I wanted to learn how companies worked, how leaders thought, and how people built empires from nothing. Those stolen hours became my secret power. I didn't have money. I didn't have support. But I had hunger, and I had resilience. When my parents thought I was folding laundry in silence, I was memorizing leadership strategies in my head. When they sent me to buy groceries, I'd study the way store managers handled staff. Every little detail became a lesson. Years passed like that. My siblings grew more entitled, and my parents grew more obsessed with impressing rich people in town. They loved showing off, pretending we were a perfect family. And that's when it happened, the day everything changed. One afternoon, my parents told me to prepare the house for a special guest. "This is our chance to finally make a good impression," my father said, his eyes gleaming with greed. "The CEO of a big company is visiting. Do everything perfectly, or you'll ruin it for us." I cleaned every corner until my hands were raw. I cooked dishes that made the whole house smell like a five-star restaurant. And when the CEO arrived, my parents dressed my sister in her prettiest clothes, introduced her with fake pride, and pushed me back into the kitchen. "Stay out of sight," my mother whispered harshly. "You're just here to serve." I stood there, my heart pounding, carrying a tray of tea. And then, the moment I'll never forget happened. The CEO looked at me, not at my sister, not at my parents, but directly at me. He paused, squinted, and then smiled like he recognized me. "You," he said. "I know you. Aren't you the young woman who submitted that brilliant business proposal through our online program?" My tray almost slipped from my hands. My parents froze, confused. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "That was me." The CEO's smile widened. Incredible work. We've been trying to reach you. That proposal was so impressive, the board unanimously approved it. Congratulations, boss. Boss. He called me boss. Right there, in my parents' living room, in front of the very people who had made me feel worthless for years. My parents' faces drained of color. My sister's mouth fell open. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. That moment wasn't just about recognition. It was about freedom. Because the girl who once scrubbed floors was now being acknowledged as a leader, someone who could change her destiny. And in that silence, while my parents stood frozen, I finally understood, I was never their maid. I was always meant to be something greater. The silence in the room after the CEO's words was deafening. My father, who had always puffed his chest around powerful men, suddenly looked like a balloon with all the air sucked out. My mother's fake smile trembled, and my sister's painted nails tapped nervously against the armrest as if she couldn't accept what she'd just heard. And me? I stood there holding a tray of tea, my hands shaking, but for the first time, not from fear, from power. The CEO didn't stop there. He set his cup aside, walked straight over to me, and extended his hand. "You've got vision," he said warmly. "We're launching a new initiative, and I want you to be part of it. Your ideas were groundbreaking, and I don't say that lightly. People twice your age don't think with the kind of clarity you've shown." I wanted to pinch myself. For years, I had been invisible. For years, I had been told to stay out of sight, to stay small, to accept my role as a shadow in my own family. And now, in one sentence, this man had placed me in the light so bright it was almost blinding. My parents were scrambling to catch up with reality, trying to figure out how their maid daughter was suddenly the one being praised. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Oh yes, of course," he said, his voice dripping with fake pride. "She's always been ambitious." He shot me a look that said, "Don't you dare embarrass us." My mother forced a laugh, adding, "We always knew she had something special in her, didn't we?" But I saw the panic in their eyes. They hadn't raised me to shine, they had raised me to serve. The CEO wasn't fooled. He studied them for a moment, then turned back to me. "Tell me, how has your family supported you in your journey? I imagine they must be so proud." His words cut like a blade because I knew the truth. Pride? Support? My parents had given me nothing but chores, humiliation, and empty promises. But I smiled politely and said, they taught me resilience. That was the only truth I could offer without exposing the years of pain. Later that evening, after the CEO left, my parents' masks dropped. My father stormed into the kitchen where I was cleaning up. "What was that?" he hissed. "How dare you keep something like this from us? You made us look like fools." My mother joined in, her voice sharp. "Do you realize the opportunity you almost ruined for us? You could have at least told us you were, whatever this is." I stared at them, anger rising in my chest like a fire I could no longer control. "Ruined it for you?" I said quietly, my voice shaking but steady. "Everything I've achieved, I did in spite of you, not because of you. You treated me like a maid in this house, but out there, I am seen as someone with worth." They both went silent. My father's face turned red, and for the first time, he didn't know what to say. My mother folded her arms, her eyes darting away. They weren't used to me speaking back, let alone standing tall. The next few weeks changed everything. I started working directly with the CEO's team. They flew me out for meetings, asked for my input, and treated me like an equal. Every time I walked into the office, I felt a little stronger, a little more like the version of myself I had always dreamed of being. And every time I came home, my parents' attitude shifted slightly. Suddenly, they weren't barking orders at me. They weren't handing me laundry baskets or demanding I scrub the floors. Instead, they asked polite questions. "How was your day? Do you need anything?" It was awkward, forced, and drenched in guilt. But here's the thing about respect. once you've been denied it for so long, you don't settle for scraps when it finally comes. I didn't need their sudden kindness. I needed their acknowledgement of the years they had stolen from me, the childhood they had stripped away. And that acknowledgement never came. One night, I sat at the dinner table with them. My siblings were chatting about their new gadgets, their new clothes, the little luxuries they still enjoyed. My parents kept sneaking glances at me, almost as if they were trying to figure out how to handle this new version of me. Finally, my father cleared his throat and said, "We're proud of you." Those words should have meant something. They should have healed me. But instead, they felt empty, like a bandage slapped on a wound too deep to close. I smiled politely, but inside, I was screaming. Proud? Where was that pride when I was crying alone on my birthday? Where was that pride when they made me serve guests while pretending I was just the help? Where was that pride when they crushed my spirit, again and again? I realized in that moment that sometimes, family doesn't apologize. Sometimes, family doesn't apologize. Sometimes, the justice you seek doesn't come in the form of tears or regret from the people who hurt you. Sometimes, the justice comes when you rise so high, their mistreatment can no longer touch you. The CEO's faith in me gave me wings. I threw myself into the work, staying late at the office, brainstorming new projects, and pushing myself harder than ever before. And it paid off. Within months, I wasn't just a contributor, I was leading a team. People looked to me for answers, for direction, for leadership. They called me boss not because of a title, but because of the respect I had earned. Every time I heard that word, boss, it echoed in my heart. Not because it made me feel powerful, but because it reminded me that I had rewritten my own story. I was no longer the invisible maid my parents tried to keep in the shadows. I was a woman with a voice, a vision, and a destiny. And yet, a part of me still longed for something I couldn't admit out loud. I wanted my parents to truly see me. Not as their ticket to social approval. Not as their maid. Not even as their successful daughter. I wanted them to see me as me, the girl they had ignored, belittled, and dismissed, who had somehow risen despite it all. That longing, that small fragile hope, kept me tethered to them even when I wanted to break free completely. It's strange how even the deepest wounds still ache for healing, even when you know it may never come. As the months rolled by, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined back when I was scrubbing dishes and folding laundry late into the night. My voice mattered now. My ideas mattered. I walked into boardrooms with confidence, stood in front of executives twice my age, and watched them nod as they took notes on what I said. But even with all the success, every time I went home, the air was heavy. My parents acted cautious, almost like they were walking on eggshells around me. My siblings avoided eye contact, confused by the shift in power dynamics. It was like everyone was waiting for me to either explode or forgive, but neither came easily. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, I came home to find my parents waiting in the living room. They had dressed nicely, almost as if they were preparing for guests. My father gestured for me to sit down. "We need to talk," he said, his voice more serious than I'd heard in years. My mother clasped her hands together nervously. They started with rehearsed words. "We're sorry," my mother said quietly. "We didn't realize, we didn't know," my father added, "we were trying to give your siblings a better chance, and maybe we overlooked you. But look at you now, you proved us wrong." I listened in silence, my heart torn in two directions. Part of me wanted to scream, "Sorry isn't enough. Sorry won't give me back my childhood, the respect I deserved, the years I lost." But another part of me, the part that still craved a parent's love, wanted to lean in and accept those fragile words. "I don't need you to be proud of me now," I finally said. "I needed you when I was small, when I was crying alone, when I felt worthless in this very house. You can't undo that." My voice cracked, but I held steady. "All I wanted was to be your daughter. Not your maid. Not your shame. Just your daughter." Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but she didn't speak. My father looked away, his jaw tightening. For once, there was no defense, no excuse. Only silence. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything. I realized something powerful: forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's about setting yourself free. I couldn't control whether my parents ever truly regretted their actions. But I could control how much of my heart I let them continue to own. So the next morning, I made a choice. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was preparing tea, and I said, "I forgive you." Her eyes widened, shocked. Before she could respond, I added, "But that doesn't mean I'll forget. It means I'm choosing peace for myself." From that day forward, I stopped waiting for their validation. I stopped longing for the kind of parents I wished I had, and accepted the ones I did. They were flawed, selfish, and blind to my worth, but their blindness no longer defined me. My success, my resilience, my strength, that was mine alone. The CEO who once called me boss became a mentor. He encouraged me to keep pushing forward, to believe in myself even when doubts crept in. With his guidance, I launched my own startup, an initiative to help young women who, like me, had been underestimated, silenced, or treated like they didn't matter. I wanted to create a space where they could dream without limits, where no one told them they weren't enough. And here's the twist life threw at me: the more I lifted others up, the more I healed myself. Every time a girl told me, "Because of you, I believe I can do it too," it stitched a piece of my broken heart back together. Every time I saw someone's eyes light up with hope, I felt the glow of a future brighter than the darkness I had known. My parents? They came around in their own way. They started bragging about me to neighbors, telling everyone their daughter was a boss now. It was ironic, almost laughable. The same people who once hid me away now wanted to display me like a trophy. But I didn't care. Because the truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. One day, during a family gathering, my father stood up and raised a glass. He called me his greatest pride. Everyone clapped, but as I looked into his eyes, I saw something deeper than pride. I saw guilt. Maybe it wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. And I realized then that sometimes people show regret not with words, but with the weight in their eyes. Standing there, surrounded by family, colleagues, and friends, I thought back to that moment when the CEO first looked at me and said, "Congratulations, boss." Those words had been the spark, but the fire had always been inside me. My life had turned, not because my parents changed, but because I refused to stay small. I refused to accept the role they forced on me. And that, I realized, is the greatest lesson of all. We can't always choose the family we're born into, but we can choose the story we write for ourselves. So to anyone listening right now who feels unseen, unheard, or unloved, let me tell you this: you are not defined by how others treat you. You are not just the role they assign to you. You are capable of rewriting your story, of turning your pain into power, of becoming the boss of your own life. Because in the end, being called boss isn't about titles, money, or success. It's about owning your worth. And that's something no one, not even your own family, can ever take away from you.